Hey guys, today's video is about tool storage and shop organization. And with the support of Rockler, I'm finally feeling like I'm getting the shop set up and looking good.
For my circular saw, I started gathering and laying out some scrap pieces in a way that would let the saw sit flat while the blade and guard sit recessed in a hole. To attach the pieces together, I used some drops of CA glue in tandem with regular wood glue. The wood glue makes for a stronger bond, but it takes time to dry. The CA glue cures instantly and holds the pieces together, allowing me to keep working. Think of it like a clamp that you don't have to work around. I checked the fit and marked a line where the back of the saw would sit. To hold the saw in place, I made a block with a little rabbet cut in it that would hook over the saw plate. There's one part of the saw that sticks out too far, so I cut a notch that would fit around it. I attached the block using the same double glue trick, being careful to position it precisely on the line. Then I used my table saw and miter saw to trim the workpiece down to size. I clamped the board in my end vise to find just the right angle, then used a sliding T-bevel to transfer that angle to another board. I made that cut on my miter saw, then used just CA glue to hold the boards together while I ran in screws from the top. At this point, I'm starting to think about how I don't want to see any hardware once these tool holders are mounted on the wall. In this case, because of where they are, I'm unlikely to see them, but I can plug the holes later if I want. I cut some funny angles into another board and attached it in the corner that was created by the other two. This board is necessary to add strength to hold the weight of the saw. I end up not really liking how this looks, so later on I make a few adjustments off camera. Next, I switched to working on a holder for my reciprocating saw. With my camera set on the wrong white balance and my elbow stuck right in the line of sight, I crudely traced the bottom outline of the saw on a piece of plywood. See, there it is. I cut that shape out on my bandsaw, then checked to see how it fit against the saw. I went back and forth this way a few times until I had the shape fitting perfectly. Next, I attached a few short standoffs to the board that will hold it up against the center line of the saw. This is what will actually support the weight of the tool on the wall, but I needed a way to ensure that it couldn't get knocked off. So I cut the rough shape of an overlapping piece out of paper, then cut and fine-tuned that shape on a thin piece of walnut. Then I attached two more short standoffs to that piece. In watching this footage back, I realize this probably looks like a convoluted design, but at this point I have committed to the idea of not seeing any hardware, so bear with me, it pays off. I used my drill press to put some holes in the middle piece, then used a dowel center to transfer those hole locations to the standoffs on the walnut piece, and drilled matching holes in that side as well. I glued dowels into the walnut side, but I managed to stick my head in front of the camera for that shot. What is wrong with me? It's like this is my first time making a video or something. Well, I recently got a new tripod, so I'm just gonna blame it on that thing. The tripod is at fault for setting up the wrong angle. That excuse ought to keep my fragile ego intact. The dowels slide into the mating holes and hide all that ugliness with a functional piece of unnecessary walnut. And the weird architecture in the back turns out to be perfectly sized for blade storage. See, I told you there would be a payoff. The holder for my cordless trim router is incredibly simple. I traced the base on a piece of walnut, then used a washer to trace a second evenly spaced line. I used a Forstner bit to drill a hole in the center to give me a place to start. You can see the part of a hole in the corner of the board. I tested the depth there, making sure it was just deeper than the thickness of the base plate. I used a spiral router bit, but the importance here is that it has a flat bottom, and I set the depth on my router to match the depth of the hole that I just drilled. Then I proceeded to hog out all the material inside the white line. When doing a procedure like this one, make sure you do the inside before you cut the final shape out of the board so that there's a lot of extra flat surface for the base plate to ride on. And whoever keeps sneaking into my shop at night and moving the switch on my trim router, please stop it. It makes it really difficult to get the thing turned off. I cut the shape out on my bandsaw, then used a sander to sneak up on the line. I used CA glue to attach a small strip of walnut over the recess to hold the router. The base plate tips into place, but it can't fall out. I used several pocket holes on the bottom side to attach this walnut ashtray to the wall. I thought about using dowels again in the style of a floating shelf, but this is just so small and light that it seemed like overkill. Besides, you can't see the pocket holes unless you're really short. The last tool holder is for my cordless brad nailer. I cut a strip of wood to sit flush with the nail magazine when the tool is laying flat. Then I attached a strip of walnut to it. I also attached a second strip to create a channel for the magazine to sit in. On the back side, I cut a vertical chunk of walnut and shaped it to fit around the contours of the nailer. I marked its location, then attached it to the baseboard. Yeah, come on, man. Is this your first day? Who sets up a shot like this? Evil tripods who are trying to sabotage me, that's who. Next, I spent way too much time shaping a weird little hook, then attached it to the back piece to capture the trigger of the nailer and hold it in place. I used an HVLP sprayer to put on several coats of a really durable finish. This stuff is left over from doing new hardwood stair treads in my old house. I figure if it's durable enough to get walked on, it's good enough for this. You can tell by all the holes in the wall that I struggled with the perfect placement for these for a little while, but I finally hung everything up and put my tools in their new homes. You might notice that I modified the circular saw holder slightly and gave it a magnetic walnut faceplate to hide the screw holes and make it look fancy. With the power tools out of the way, it was time to find a home for all my clamps. After moving, most of them stayed stored in boxes in the barn, and the ones I was using just got leaned in a corner or tossed under a bench. That's no good. So I'm going to get them out of storage and off of my floor by hanging them on this wall using these ultra simple and strong clamp racks from Rockler. These racks have holes spaced for 16-inch studs, but my wall is a little wonky and I couldn't use them that way. Luckily, all those horizontal boards are solid wood, so I could just hang them wherever I wanted. I started in the top corner and drove in one screw, then leveled the rack and drove in the opposite side. I clamped a long level to the bottom of the first bracket to make hanging a second one on the same line really easy. Then I hung all my longest clamps from that top row since they would hang low enough for me to reach them. Then I started filling in the open spaces with the rest of my clamps. I have more squeeze clamps than anything else, so I hung 2 racks side by side for those. I hung the first one, then used the long level to hold the second one. I measured the spacing, then bumped the second rack over to match it before attaching it to the wall. My bandy clamps traveled all this way, still holding onto the French cleat hangers I used in my old shop, so I just hung up a short plywood cleat and put the whole pile of them back on the wall. There was just enough space under my parallel clamps to hang my bench cookie collection. Word to the wise, these are not edible cookies, and that reminds me I need to send my dentist an apology letter. I also made this neat little walnut rooftop-looking hanger to hold my assembly squares. Ah, that is much better. Lastly, it's time to address this mess that I'm generously calling dust collection. The dust collector is fine, it's unchanged since my last shop, but my ability to use it is pretty much garbage. You might recall the cool fence I built for my miter saw that had dust collection built into it. Well, it didn't survive the move and it broke into 3 pieces along the way. I'll do something cool and extravagant again in the future, but for now, I just need to plug into the onboard dust chute without having to toss hoses around the room, only to have them disconnect themselves. I hung up one of Rockler's new wall-mounted dust couplers on the wall behind the bench, then connected a flexible hose from the saw. I detached my old ultra-flexible dust hose from the dust collector and mounted it to the other side of the coupler. I mounted a second coupler right next to the dust collector, then stretched out my old blue hose and cut and attached it to this one as well, effectively creating a wall-length tube that reduces from 4 inches to 2.5 inches and connects directly to the saw. On the other side of the machine, I mounted a docking port high on the wall, then attached a shiny new blue dust hose to the dust intake and to a quick change handle. With the handle on the docking port, you can see I have a lot of slack still hanging on the ground, so I hung up some wall straps which lets me bundle up the long hose to keep it up off the ground where it won't get wrecked and I won't trip over it. As of right now, this hose is expandable up to 28 feet, which would reach every single nook and cranny of the shop. That's probably overkill, and I will likely cut it shorter in the future when I have a better feel for how I'm going to use it. For now, it's nice to be able to unhook one strap and connect the hose to 4 of my biggest stationary machines, or I can unhook both, throw on the floor sweeper attachment, and completely clean my entire shop.
Hey guys, that about wraps this one up. Make sure you stick around for the bonus features, but first I want to say a huge thank you to Rockler for supporting this video. If you need to organize your shop, go check out their website. Chances are if you need it, they've thought of it and they've done a good job building it. So thanks Rockler, go check them out, and we'll see you guys next time.
My oldest son helped me decide where to hang my new paper towel holder. He wanted it low enough so that he could grab them without needing my help or the help of a stool. It's important to note here that he also fell victim to the evil tripod. It might look like he's just standing in the way, preventing you from seeing the task at hand, but that's just what the tripod wants you to think. Don't be fooled. This is clearly a tripod conspiracy, and I won't rest until I get to the bottom of it.
Perfect paper towel.
Yep.
You can just set the phone right there. Or put this stuff that this thing says on there.
Or charge camera batteries.
Oh, yeah.
And you guys can get to the paper towels.
Yep. Or if you ask us to grab your phone or something like that.
Why would I do something that crazy?
Well, because we're nice.
Because you want to play with my phone.
No, I do not. Dad. What are you doing?